Azar Jammine, Director and Chief Economist of Econometrics. It's good to have you, Azar. Welcome to Morning Live. Alarmist. That's the word you used right now while you were listening to the 16 rand to the litre. You don't think that's going to happen?
Well, you know, it's eventually going to happen. Just as a few years ago people were saying petrol would hit 14 rand a litre, well, it's now just about there. In order for the petrol price to go to 16 rand a litre, either we've got to have the international oil price shooting ahead to $125 a barrel from its current level of $105 a barrel, or alternatively, the rand has to depreciate to around 14 rand to the dollar. Now, that's possible, but I don't see that as a probable outcome over the next few months.
I mean, when we look at that graph that we saw, you know, on the insert that we just played, we've seen a steady increase, and I won't even say it's been a slow increase. It's been quite a dramatic increase over the years. I mean, it doesn't seem to be going any lower. The only way is up at this stage, doesn't it look like?
Well, it looks like it, but it's critically dependent upon what happens to the rand.
Okay.
And in fact, of the 39 cent per litre increase that came into effect today, no less than 35 cents a litre was due to the rand's depreciation.
Mm. Well, I mean, that's not good news going forward then, because, I mean, we've even seen interest rates going up, and yet we've still got this currency sitting at around about the 11 rand mark. It doesn't seem to have helped the currency.
Higher interest rates right now, in fact, might even be dampening the currency in the short term, because international investors say that higher interest rates are bad for economic growth, therefore there's less reason to invest in South Africa, so we're attracting less capital because of that. But you know, going out a few months' time, everyone's kind of assumes that the current negative sentiment towards emerging markets emanating from US monetary policy, pulling back a bit of the liquidity that they're adding, is very bad news. But that sentiment is not going to persist indefinitely.
So things will turn around. When are you hoping for this turnaround?
I'm hoping for this turnaround by the second half of the year.
Okay.
And, you know, people are jumping up and down. We'll see whether they're jumping up and down when the petrol price starts coming down, because the rand is strengthening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's talk about this currency at these levels. I had just a very interesting interview now with the World Bank economist for South Africa and other countries within the region, talking about the fact that we need to strengthen our exports. We need to take advantage of this currency. And she said she really hopes we go ahead and we do this. You're in agreement, obviously.
I'm totally in agreement. With the rand where it is right now, it's actually adjusted for inflation. It's about 30% cheaper than it was 2.5 years ago. That gives an enormous competitive advantage to exporters, so long as their costs don't rise massively in the interim to wipe out the benefit in a very short space of time. The good news thus far is that despite the fall in the rand, inflation has not risen all that much. Because of tight economic conditions, businesses are finding it very difficult to pass on cost increases. And so long as that environment continues, I think exporters will gain a huge advantage from this. And already in the November and December trade figures, non-mineral export growth has been shooting ahead. Yeah. People have been reluctant to even mention that, but I've looked at the figures and it's very encouraging.
Good. Food inflation, because that's a concern. You know, we can talk about exports until we're blue in the face, but unfortunately it doesn't affect that man on the street directly, because when you walk into a shop and you need to buy your basics, that's when you have a problem. When you're putting petrol in your car, that's where we have problems. But let's talk about that, food. I know you have views on this.
Yes, food inflation is going to rise over the next few months, mainly because the prices of maize and wheat, key commodities, have soared ahead, partly as a result of the fall in the rand. But you've got to recognize that a year ago, food prices at that level actually fell quite a bit. So if you look at the picture over a longer period of time, food prices are unlikely to rise, or inflation of food is unlikely to rise beyond about 7 or 8%. Right now it's 3.5%, 4%. So yes, it's going to rise, but it's not going to be a total disaster.
Yeah. E-tolls. Remember talking to me on the day that the e-tolls were
I still
announced?
emphasize that this is a huge storm in a very small teacup.
Yeah.
The impact of e-tolls on people's spending ability is negligible.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you think it's negligible?
It's very negligible. The irritation with e-tolls is people are saying, why introduce such a complex system that costs so much to collect revenue when you could have just added 10 cents a litre onto the fuel price and got the same amount of money. And in fact, if you had done that 2.5 years ago, you would have already got an extra 7 billion. SANRO would have got 7 billion rand to play with.
And it would have been paid off. When we say negligible, though, you know, there's some companies that are really, I mean, their costs have gone up quite immensely.
One or two companies, yes. But if you look overall, the overall economic situation, even the most optimistic SANRAL forecasts originally were looking at raising 300 million rand per month or 3.6 billion rand per year from e-tolls. Now, private consumption expenditure itself is over 2 trillion rand. So we're talking about 1 rand out of every 1,000 going towards e-tolls, maybe 1.50 rand out of every 1,000 going towards e-tolls. That is not the big thing. Far bigger, more important, for example, is the rise in the petrol price and the rise in fuel prices.
Yeah.
So one needs to get that into perspective. And on petrol, let's not forget that in February last year, the petrol price actually rose by 41 cents per litre.
Yes.
So ironically, today's petrol price increase is going to result in a fall, albeit marginal, in inflation rather than a rise in the year-on-year inflation rate.
But still depressing when we look at that graph and when we go to the petrol tank with the petrol pumps and we fill up and we see how it has gone up. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for talking to us and putting some optimism in us, because I think we've only been hearing doom and gloom. So it's good to hear a more optimistic perspective. Econometrics economist, thank you so much for talking to us. Azar Jammine. All right, let's have a look at